Welcome to another episode of Mystic Skeptic Radio's Raiders of the Unknown. Today's guest is Hayden Hendrix, and he'll be talking about his website and information he shares about the Wilderness Tabernacle. Can you please tell us, for our audience on YouTube, what are they looking at and what is the website that people can research your work?
Sure. Thanks for having me, David. My website is renformation.com. That's spelled Renformation, renformation.com. And it primarily deals with the Exodus Wilderness Tabernacle. I'm going to switch over to the website and I can begin. Do you see the website Renformation?
Yes, so for our radio audience, we're looking at his website. Um, it has different colors, the word Reformation, and then in the bottom it says Enlightenment dash Reformation dash Renaissance, and there's a image of the Wilderness Tabernacle as you envision it, which is round like a sphere, and it has a round gate around it, and I guess there's an entrance in the front.
Yes, it's this is a 1/75th size model of the Wilderness Tabernacle, and in its actual size, it stands about 6 stories high, and it's quite an impressive thing to see on a battlefield. If you're the enemy coming in to attack the Israelites, then you see this giant red, almost glowing dome, and to those who are the Israelites, seeing that with the Ark of the Covenant inside of it is just a great encouragement. But I'll tell you that this model is from project314.org. Project314.org is the ministry that Andrew Hoy began about 10 years ago, 2014, 2015. And Andrew Hoy is a mechanical engineer. And years ago, he was studying the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant, and it led him to look at the numbers and to take a second look at the dimensions of the Wilderness Tabernacle. And after he studied the Hebrew and became more familiar with the language, it came out to be a dome shape instead of what everyone thinks of as the tabernacle, a box or shoebox shaped tabernacle. Uh, Most people remember Moses on Mount Sinai, and to me, this is really important because this story begins when Moses is in front of Pharaoh and he says, "Let my people go." And when he told Pharaoh, "Let my people go," we all know that part. We've seen it in movies and read it, and it's a phrase that many of us use. But do you know, David, what comes after that?
So they may worship me in the desert.
That's it. And the Hebrew, "so they may worship me in the desert," means so they can have a festival and march in a circle for me. And this march in a circle is a hint to what's coming in the next year or so when they are delivered from Egypt. They are set free. And when they build this tabernacle, this round tabernacle, this circle, this dome, they were able to march around it. So it's a prophecy that's coming to fulfillment. As I go back to the website, you see that it is dome shaped. It stands about 6 stories high. And for some people say, well, the first objection that people come to is saying, well, doesn't the Bible say, Exodus 27:18 say that it's 100 cubits in length and 50 in width? So that is literally a box shape. And that's true if you just use those verses alone. But if you look at verse 17, If you look at Exodus 26, 1 through 6, we'll look at in just a moment, it sets our context. So when we read these numbers, it's not just a 50 by 100 box shaped tabernacle, it's actually 100 in diameter, 100 cubit diameter, and a 50 cubit radius. And that's where the mistake happens. And this goes all the way back to the recording of Josephus Flavius. Josephus, the historian. Most of us know about him. He's a historian that we look to for some information about that time frame. And he begins his instructions in the middle of the construction instructions and does not actually start in Exodus 26:1. But for a moment, let's say I'm in front of a group of children and I'm trying to explain to them this complex geometry and this ancient Hebrew language and all these. How would I explain this? As I sometimes will tell people, explain it to me as though I'm a child. And as simple as I can put it, and we'll see in just a moment with some other illustrations, the inner courtyard curtains in the traditional model are bumped up together by the 28 cubit edge and the 28 cubit edge. And you put 10 of these together, and that's what covers the shoebox shaped tabernacle. Well, we're going to see in just a moment that the Hebrew language does not say put them up edge to edge together, but actually the end outermost edge where they fit together and they cross over just a little, if you can see that. And that little bit of intersection is where the gold hooks bring these curtains together. And if you take 10 of these and you stretch them out end to end, these 10 curtains that are 28 cubits long and 4 cubits high. I'll ask you, David, what do you get when you put 10 rectangles together end to end? What shape would that make?
I guess a
It's a
triangle.
if you put 10 of them together, it would be a polygon, yes, but it would be a decagon because you have 10 of these end to end together and they create that. And if I was still explaining this to children, the outer courtyard curtains go through the same principle. The traditional model that we see from Josephus is these curtains are bumped up edge to edge. These are 30 by 4 cubits. And so they would take 11 of these and put these together. It would look like a giant triangle. But in actuality, with Exodus 26, 1 through 6, being our guide, being our precedent, we are putting them again together end to end. And you see right here, right where they cross over just a little bit, this is where the seam is, or in the English, some versions call it the hang over, because they're hanging over one another. And these are joined together by silver hooks. They're not end to end perfectly. There's a slight crossover. We would call it a seam. If we were stitching this, it would be the seam just like you have on a shirt or on your jeans. And we'll look at that in just a moment. And lastly, before we go back to the website, the boards of the tabernacle that make the tent part, the dome part that hold up the roof. Again, in the traditional model, the boards are edge to edge. These are 10 cubits long. But in the Hebrew, we have the same word that means the cut end, the cutoff, the end. And again, these boards are put together end to end and begin to make the dome shape that we see. So if I was speaking to a group of elementary students, I would say the curtains don't go like this, the boards don't go like this. They go together like this with a small seam in between. And with the boards, there's a silver rod that holds these together like a linchpin. All right, let's go to the website.
But you said that it's 6 stories high. How did the Israelites put it together without any scaffolding in the middle of the desert?
That is described in detail by Andrew Hoy, the mechanical engineer that discovered this. And this is his book, The House of El Shaddai, by Andrew L. Hoy. But the Levites were very serious about this. They created a perimeter around the building site, and they were the only ones allowed to build it. It was so important and so serious that they said if anybody comes in to look at our work or to see what's going on, they are to be killed, because there are these giant beams, these woods of cedar that are being put together, and you put it together piece by piece. And we're talking about the the best craftsmen and the best builders that Egypt had of that day. They were the slaves. They built most of their structures. And so it just took some time for them to put little, like eating an elephant, piece by piece. And we'll see in a moment when we're about halfway through, they raise the tabernacle up. So imagine all of all of these boards being put together, being locked in and cinched, and then being raised up. And so it took more than 1,000 men. We don't believe that there were animals used. So it was quite a feat, but this is not something outside of the realm that the Israelites in Egypt would have done for work. This would have been practical and doable for them. And thank you for asking the question. If you have any criticism, I welcome that. I look forward to it. Because I'm still learning as we go. I'd like to play a video. I don't think I have the audio, but if you would,
If you can help me describe the video for our listening audience.
this is a computer graphic. It's CGI of, I'll go ahead and play it and then we'll talk about it. We're looking at a large field at the bottom of Mount Sinai. And we are going to be going in a circle as though we're in an airplane surrounding this tabernacle, and we see all the tents that are around it, and we see the round perimeter that the Levites had to protect them while they're building it. And at night we see the cloud of the Lord, the fire of the Lord, coming out of the tabernacle, out of the top of it. It's quite a sight. And we're spinning around it as though we're in an airplane or a helicopter going around it.
Okay, so that was it looked like the Dome of the Rock or a spaceship in the middle, surrounded by tents, and the tents are circular as well or dome shaped. And it was like an aerial view, like from a drone around. And when you say the glory of the Lord, for those that are not familiar, is a pillar of fire that is coming out from the middle. There's a opening at the top of the dome, and there's fire coming out.
Great. Thank you. In this next video, we also have another drone type view of going around in a circle, but we're going to see something that I find amazing. We're going to see the traditional tabernacle, the shoebox as we call it, the shoebox, or I call it Josephus tabernacle or Herod's tabernacle, and not in a disparaging way, but I'm trying to connect the dots to show that this is not what Exodus taught. So let's watch this video. We see the traditional box shape or the shoebox shaped tabernacle and its outer courtyard. Now the tabernacle explodes and we see all the pieces looking chaotic, then they all come back together to create the exact same pieces that created the tabernacle. The shoebox are now put together to make the dome shaped tabernacle. And now we see the brazen altar. Instead of it being a square, it is turned and it is now a circle. We see the glory of the Lord, the fire, the pillar, the fire coming out of this tabernacle. And we see the sunset. We see the tents around there of the Israelites.
So this is a CGI recreation based on the Project 314, and they're asking for donations to keep their work going. So, what's your affiliation with the people who made this video and the guy who wrote the book?
my affiliation with the people who made the video, one or two of these videos I'll show today, we've already seen two. We've got one more. I don't have any affiliation with either of them. I am a fan of Project 314, but I am not endorsed. I'm not affiliated. I don't speak for them. And so there's no relationship there, although I am a fan and have continued to learn and study this. And thank you again for your questions. And if something doesn't make sense, call it out. And I may not have the answer, but I'll do my best to
How did you
try.
come across it, and what is your goal with sharing this information?
I came across it maybe 5 years ago. When I first saw it, I thought, this is the dome-shaped tabernacle. That means we misunderstood what Moses heard from God. We misunderstood what God said to Moses on Mount Sinai. And that question's been asked a lot of times. Well, what does this matter? What does that mean to me? And to anybody who's a fan of truth, just knowing what the scriptures say, whether you're a believer or not, we want to know what uh, God actually said to Moses there. And that what makes this different than maybe different doctrines or theology or belief systems or uh, even mystical, esoteric beliefs is that all we're talking about right now is a blueprint for building a large tent. We're not talking about the spiritual implications or anything like that. We're just taking a blueprint saying 1 + 1 = 2, and this is how it looks. And because this is new and a new way to look at it, and that it may sound strange, but I just try to be passionately dispassionate as we go. All right, I'm going to read for just a moment. This is a summary of the entire website. And the purpose of this, like I said, is to get the truth out and for people to discover this on their own as they study the scriptures as well. I'm going to read my opening statements from the website Renformation.com. After 3,000 years, the wilderness tabernacle is returning, and the New Jerusalem is now discernible for everyone. Summary of Exodus 26 and 27. Josephus Flavius was wrong about the box-shaped tabernacle being 50 cubits wide and 100 long. That's his quote. In context, the Exodus blueprints measure a 100-cubit diameter, a 50-cubit radius, and a 314-cubit circumference from Exodus 26, 1 through 13. Exodus 26:4 translates quatah as end, and it's backed up by the word outermost for the crucial placement of the curtain's blue loops. The sledge word error is easily corrected with knowledge of loom weaving basics and Hebrew language skills. The tabernacle curtains are connected at the cut outermost ends and not the uncut sledge edges. In Exodus 25, Moses is given the list for the tabernacle, which is followed by the instructions on how to begin the construction in Exodus 26, 1 through 6. Moses' building instructions start in Exodus 26, 1 through 6, which Exodus 26 and 27 must accommodate. Now, I have a chart here that has illustrations on it so people can better understand what the scriptures are saying. And this comes down, the foundation, the cornerstone, the linchpin to this dome-shaped tabernacle really comes down to the foundation found in Exodus 26, 1 through 6. The illustration that we're looking at has a 28 cubit by 4 cubit curtain. These are the inner curtains mentioned in Exodus 26, 1 through 6. At the top and the bottom of the 28 cubit lengths, that is called the sledge edge. In loom weaving terminology, They are uncut. If you've seen someone work on an ancient loom, a loom weaving cloth, they go back and forth, and the edges to the left and the right of the person weaving, that is called the uncut edge, the sledge, the self edge. If someone here is listening and they're familiar with loom weaving, they'll understand this better than people who understand how to build tents and Hebrew and all of that put together, because this is speaking their language. At the 4 cubit ends, that is called the cut end, the outermost. And the formal word if for loom weaving, that is called the warp. WARP, like warp speed. The warp gives the cloth its strength and its form, while the sledge and the weft go back and forth and help keep its form and keep it from fraying. The illustration I have to the left of this curtain is of the traditional tabernacle, the rectangle shaped tabernacle. And this is where the curtains are joined together by the 28 cubit edges and not the 4 cubit ends. I also have an illustration below this showing the two sections of the curtains before they're joined together and how they would look if you looked on top of the rectangle tabernacle, how it would look before the curtains were on top of the tabernacle and draped over the rectangle shaped tabernacle. To the right, we have what I believe what Exodus 26, 1 through 6 is describing. The 5 curtains that are split are joined end to end, and then they are brought together to create all 10 of the curtains are joined end to end, which creates the shape of the polygon of a decagon. If you'll notice to the left of the curtain, the tabernacle, only 9 of the 10 blue loops are even connected, where we'll see in a moment that all 10 are be connected by other blue loops. So the traditional tabernacle is breaking 2 rules right there. Off to the right, you'll see that all 10 curtains are joined end to end by the blue loops as instructed. Now, just for a minute, let's talk big picture. And you asked a great question. So, what does this mean? I believe this means the foundation of modern civilization is about to go through what my website is called a Renformation, where it changes what we believe about reality, history, what is possible, because what we're looking at, and you may know this already, David, the tabernacle is in the likeness of Solomon's temple, Ezekiel's temple, the New Jerusalem. All of those structures that I named, usually the first thing that pops in a person's mind is a rectangle box traditional building. But in reality, all of these structures that I just mentioned are in the likeness of the tabernacle, which means they are dome shaped. That is a radical difference. In the illustration that I have here, I have 4 pictures. The top picture in the middle is above the 3 pictures, and the top pictures of the dome shaped tabernacle. Off to the left, I have written, building the second temple mark the end of understanding Solomon's temple and the tabernacle. Ezra 3:12, weeping. We'll get to the Ezra 3:12 weeping later on. To the right, I have written unbiblical religious traditions and eisegesis are finished, holding us captive to Babylonian architecture. The bottom 3 pictures, the first to the left is the Babylonians' Ishtar Gate, built in 575 BC by King Nebuchadnezzar II. If you think about the Babylonian structure of the Ishtar Gate, it is a box type shaped uh, gate or temple, if you will, that is an impressive sight to see. And if you look it up, you'll see it's blue, it's beautiful, it's towering with a walkway in between. The next picture to the right is a picture of the second tabernacle, the second temple, built in 515 BC. The second temple is in the likeness of the Babylonians' Ishtar Gate. You say, well, wait a minute. Why would the Ishtar Gate, why would they build something that looked like the Ishtar Gate for the temple of God? I mean, what about Solomon's temple? Wasn't it also built in the same uh, impressive box shape? No. We've been misled. Again, the tabernacle is in the likeness of Solomon's temple, Ezekiel's temple, the New Jerusalem. And off to the right, the third picture is a picture of the traditional box shaped tabernacle with the words, never the tabernacle. We're looking at revisionist history that has gone back and changed what we believed about Solomon's temple and the wilderness tabernacle. They were not box shaped, they were domes. Now, do you have any questions or comments before we move on? We're about to get into a little bit more of the detailed, mundane, what might be mundane, but I just wanted to give you a big picture of what the implications are of a domed tabernacle.
Just anthropologically speaking, the reason they believe that it was influenced by either the Egyptians, the Babylonians, or the Phoenicians is because they were part of the milieu of those people, and there was, back and forth, and it says that the Temple of Solomon was designed and built by the Phoenicians who lived in Lebanon. So, so we don't have any pictures. All we have is a description of the Bible, and then people make illustrations based on the other temples that other cultures had at that time.
That's right. And the the temp Solomon's temple was from unhewed stone, which means that they carved the stone, they fixed them. They were pre-assembled and pre-cut before they brought them back to Jerusalem because they didn't want any sounds of hammers or lumber around the building. Our neighborhood, we have houses built recently, and at all hours of the day you'll hear them banging and building. They didn't want that in the Jerusalem site, and that's the reason they were from unhewn stone. All right, back to the website. We see in Exodus, and this is where the foundation of Exodus 26 1 through 6 is. It's found in verse 4. In Exodus 26:4, Moses describes the curtain's blue loops at being at the end and outermost of the curtains. Each curtain has 4 edges. 2 are the 4-cubit cut outermost edges, and 2 are the 28-cubit uncut edges. These two technical terms in loom weaving language are called the warp, it's the 4-cubit end, and the sledge, that's the 28-cubit length, the uncut. The warp is cut, the outermost end edge, and the sledge is the uncut edge. What is the solution for correcting these errors? From the traditional box shape to the dome shape, it's very simple. In the last 2 years of me almost 2 years focus and studying on this, no one has said, let's begin at the beginning of the construction instructions and build off that from verse 26:1 all the way to the end of Exodus 27. Most people that I've debated and have presented their case never start at the beginning. They want to start just like Josephus in the middle and then towards the end and then work their way backwards, where we get this shoebox shaped tabernacle. In Exodus 26:4, we have 2 words that give us an idea of where the curtains are joined together. the end and the outermost. In Hebrew, the word end means extremity, border, edge, a termination. Outermost means outer, external, extreme, terminal. And if you'll notice, both of these words in Hebrew have the same root, quatah, quatsah, which means to cut off or to end. The illustrations I have here is an ancient loom, and you can see the where it's a picture of an ancient loom, and I have different words around it to show what they are. Off to the left and to the right of the what we would consider the 28 cubit length, that is the sledge uncut edge. They're self weaved, and the edge is to help from fraying. This is not for strength, unlike the warp that is at they are the cut end, the cut off, the end, and this is where the threads are cut, and this is where we get these important blue loops that we'll see uh, as we continue. Now, as I go back up to the illustration of the curtain, you'll see the 28 by 4 cubit curtain. You'll start to put together, oh, I see the curtains are of 3 different colors. The top part is blue, the middle part is purple, and the bottom part is red. You got the cut end or the warp, the 4 cubit edge and outermost. But we're only using the blue loops. Off to the right, you see a modern day north face tent. This looks like the kind of tent anyone would take out in the woods to go camping. You lay out the tent. The instructions say lay out the tent. That's what we've done with the curtains. Pick a location, clear the debris. That's what they would have done with the tabernacle. Found somewhere relatively flat, move the rocks and anything that was in the way. Then they would lay out the poles, then assemble the poles, then, as we'll see, raise the tent, then stake the tent attached to the rainfly. We're following the same steps as building a tent. And my theme throughout the website is the tabernacle's curtains are joined by the outermost ends, not the edges of the sledge. And off to the right, we can see different pictures. The first picture is of 10 random curtains that are blue, purple, and red, just laid out. This is for the illustration. And before I go on to describe the other pictures that are below it, let me read the scriptures, please. This is from the Young's literal translation. Thou dost make the tabernacle. This is Exodus 26, 1 through 6. Thou dost make the tabernacle 10 curtains of twined linen, blue and purple and scarlet, with cherubims, work of a designer, thou dost make them. Verse 2. The length of the curtains is 8 and 20 by the cubit, and the breadth of one curtain by 4 of the cubit. One measure is to all the curtains. Verse 3. 5 curtains are joined one to another, and 5 curtains are joined to another. Pause. All we know right now is that these 10 curtains are separated into 2 groups of 5 that are to be joined together. We don't know how or where, but we're about to find out. Verse 4. And verse 4 again is the most important verse in this entire discovery. And thou hast made blue loops upon the edge of the one curtain, at the end in the joining. So thou makest the edge of the outermost curtain in the joining of the second. Verse 5. 50 blue loops thou shalt make it in one curtain, and 50 loops thou dost make in the edge of the curtain which is in the joining of the second, causing the loops to take hold of each other. Verse 6. And thou hast made 50 hooks of gold, and join the curtains one to another by the hooks, and the tabernacle hath been one. In short, We have 10 curtains that are separated into two groups of 5 that are joined together end to end, which will be the south side and the north side. And then at the end, they're all joined together to make the decagon we've seen a few moments ago. The illustrations I have off to the right are of how the curtains would look for the traditional box shaped tabernacle, and to the right, what I believe the scriptures are actually describing. The pictures below that are the 10 curtains all joined together, the 28 edge to edge, forming a giant rectangle of the traditional tabernacle. And then off to the right, what I believe is the decagon of the 10 curtains joined end to end. Well, you're going to say something, David.
Yes. So if you, I'm an artist and I'm not the most geometrically and mathematically inclined of an artist, but wouldn't the higher up you go, the curtains would have to be smaller because the circumference would end up decreasing as you go up? If they're all the same size, then you would have extra cloth uh, available, and you have to cut it or to fold it to be able to make the sphere dome shape.
Yes. And you'll see up here in the illustration on the curtain, you'll see at the blue part, at the ends of the blue part, the 4 cubit ends, these are the extra threads that are left that create the blue loops that we just read about. And these blue loops take hold of each other around the base boards. And if you just connected them end to end without any of the seam or hangover, they would be 280 cubits long. But we know that we join them together and there is some seaming, but the Bible does not give us the 280 measurements because they are going to be seamed. There may be some of the length that's lost, as we'll see for the second set of curtains we're looking at. Does that answer the question a little bit?
Yes, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. So I'll let you keep going.
Sure.
And um, I just find it interesting that every person who has looked into this, they always come up with the same conclusion that it is a rectangular box shape. Uh, do you think that the Jewish folks who have looked at this for 2,000 years missed it somehow uh, due to poor information, or the Hebrew wasn't clear? Like, what do you think was missing?
Great questions. Let me go to the bottom and let's try to cover that in case we run out of time. In Ezra 3:12, this is out when they finished Babylonian exile, slavery, and they've been set free and they're back in Jerusalem. After some years of waiting, they begin to build the foundation of the tabernacle. And here's what Ezra 3:12 says. And many of the priests and the Levites and the heads of the fathers, the aged men who had seen the first house, meaning Solomon's temple, in this house being founded before their eyes, are weeping with a loud voice. And many shout in joy, lifting up the voice. When they saw the foundation was the shape of a rectangle, as they had been brought up in Babylon, learning how to build Babylonian buildings, the elders, the men who were before the exile, some 70 years before, remember the glory of this giant, I can only imagine, white dome that was the talk of everyone throughout the countries around. When they saw that this was going to be a Babylonian type structure paid for in part by the Babylonians, by Persia, that they saw that it was not going to be in the likeness of Solomon's temple. It was going to be in the likeness of a Babylonian god's temple. And this caused them to weep. And I've had some people say, well, it wasn't going to be as big and amazing and have all the things. Well, the dimensions are about the same. But instead of it being a dome shaped made out of stone, it was made in the likeness of a box shaped tabernacle in the likeness of a Babylonian structure. So that and so I say this was about 2,600 years ago when this was built. So I can only imagine maybe 2,500 years ago, after their great grandchildren way because they had this spectacular box shaped tabernacle, and this is all they've known. And that's where we get into the revisionist history of going back. And you're right, both Jewish and Christian scholars agree that the tabernacle, Solomon's temple, the second temple, or the renovated Herod's temple, which is just the second temple renovated into the Greco-Roman likeness, and they just believe they were all of these shapes and they were all in the likeness of each other when that didn't happen. We've been so removed, they were so removed from that time frame, they lost their language, they lost their idea of understanding what the scripture said. And like us today, we didn't we are going by our religious traditions. Let me go back up. I don't know how much time we have.
And I was gonna try to debunk you because I'm familiar with church architecture, and I thought before I looked it up that domes weren't designed until later, but now that I remember, the there's a place in Rome where they have all the different gods. I don't know if you know the name of it.
The
That was
Pantheon.
well, the Pantheon was in Greece and it was box shaped, but there was another place that was dome shaped that is in the middle of Rome. And then, according to this website, um, the first dome was found in Ukraine 19,000 years before Christ. So it's not an impossibility that domes were already around, and it's almost like an igloo shape, which I guess we can talk to some engineers about how would you build that at that time. I thought that it would take a lot of skill and um, a lot of layers of support to be able to build a dome, but we still don't even know how the pyramids were made. So, is part of your theory that this structure holds, like you mentioned, the New Jerusalem, so it holds spiritual significance, and you said, but it's also practical and able to be put together and dismantled for the children of Israel to keep traveling through the desert?
Yes, there's many other details I could go into, but uh, they did need quite a few people to build it up and to take it down. And you think about, well, what's the difference between a rectangle tabernacle and the dome shape? The dome shape would be able to handle the winds, the weight, and the way the curtains are. It would almost create an unsuction of the air to create a negative pressure. As the wind blew, it would almost hold it down as a vacuum while also being dome shaped. And we can see that in just a moment as well. And again, just stop me anytime. Now,
Yeah,
verse
so
26
just
4.
sorry, just going back. So the Pantheon is the dome-shaped place in Rome, and then the Parthenon is the box-shaped structure in Athens. Go ahead.
All of this comes down to follow. God said in Exodus 25:9, build the tabernacle in the pattern that I give you. If we follow the pattern, verses 26, 1 through 6, traps us. It holds us and we must adhere to it. And the rest of the scriptures through 26 and 27 are bound to follow what these curtains are put together as, and not just an extra add on later. They're not just curtains. Oh, we'll just put them on later. These 26:1 is where it begins. 20 Exodus 25 is where we get the supply list, a detailed supply list and how they came up with it. But 26:1 is when it begins to we start building. It'd be like building a house, like I used to hang sheetrock or drywall. We could never put up the drywall until the insulation was put in, until the plumbing was finished, the electricians had their work going. We would show up occasionally and there would be no insulation between the walls, so we could not hang the drywall. This is the same principle. We're building this tabernacle step by step, precept upon precept. And the point, I guess, that if you said, well, you've got 1 minute to make your point, I would say this, and we're looking at it in Exodus 26 4a. We see the word end, or from end, is the translated Hebrew word. The next word that is used in some translations, or it's the sentiment of the traditional box shaped tabernacle, is the word svelej. which is simply a fancy way of saying a loom terminology of the 28 cubit edge and not the 4 cubit edge. Or yes. And I want to go back up here just for a moment. We see the curtain. How can you see how many edges are on this 28 by 4 cubit curtain?
I guess
At the bottom of the curtain, it says 4 edges.
4 edges.
We got the left side, the right side, the top and the bottom. All of those are edges. How many ends are there on this 4 by 28 curtain, David?
2 ends.
There's only 2 ends. You can have 4 edges, but you can only have 2 ends. The word edges gets mixed up with the word sphledge, which is not the Hebrew translation. It is actually a synonym of an interpretation from a translator. It'd be like saying, hey, let's go play basketball. And then you call your friends and say, hey, we're going to go play volleyball. You say, we're not playing volleyball. We're playing basketball. You say, well, it's got a ball. It's got a court. It's got a net. It's got the same things, but it's totally different. The sphledge and an end are not the same. There's no gray area. You can't mix the two. They're not interchangeable. It's like black and white. Sphledge and end, two totally different words. And in this case, when they take the Hebrew word and translate it, it's an interpretation from a translator or a scribe that's trying to fit in this model into the model of Josephus Flavius, what he wrote. I'll give you an example. Young's Little Translation. It used, and I'm just going to have a small quote from Young's Little Translation, World English Bible, Durham Yames Catholic Bible, and the King James. In the Young's, it says, at the end in the joining. See that word end. World English Bible, from the edge in the coupling. Remember, we talked about edge. It's more ambiguous. You could use edge, but it's not exactly what the Hebrew word means in this context. We're talking about a loom woven curtain. The Douay Rheims Catholic Bible, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. In the sides, it uses the word sides instead of edge or end. And then what does the King James word use? One curtain from the sphledge in the coupling. This is a gross misinterpretation of what the Hebrew word means. If it had the word edge in there, like the World English Bible, you could get away with it and say, well, it's the edge. Sphledge is a totally different word. It's a synonym. It's a misinterpretation. And it's the cornerstone of where this mistake was made by trying to continue to follow religious traditions, and in this case, an unbiblical one. And I'll show you in just a moment. How much time do we have, please, David?
I believe we have another 10 minutes.
Okay. I want to go down here and show you a few more examples how the scriptures are translated. We see in the New American Standard, it uses the word end for Exodus 25:19. For the King James of Exodus 25:19, it uses the word end. In Exodus 25:19, the New American Standard uses the word end. The King James also uses the word end. But in Exodus 26:14, you can see the King James goes off the rails, chooses a totally different word that is not translated anywhere else except here. They use the word sphledge, like the illustration of playing basketball to volleyball. Two totally different things. The New American Standard goes out of its way as a footnote to use the word specifically from the end, which is the most literal translation, or technically from end. In Exodus 36:11, we again see the curtains are tied into this word, sphledge. The New American Standard for Exodus 36:11 uses this more ambiguous, somewhat appropriate word, but not specifically, edge. Exodus 37:18, New American Standard, end. King James, end. Exodus 37:8, end. King James, end. So you can see why in the world would they use a word other than end or possibly edge or sides or something that is aside to something. It's because they are trying to fit a square into a round hole, and they got to use this word fledge to make the curtains fit together like this instead of this. And
And
that's the only.
our guest is holding he has like these sheets of paper that are long, like a ruler, and he's holding them either vertical or horizontal, and he believes they're horizontal, and that's how it makes the shape of the dome.
Now, as we go on, we can, if there's some more of the history about when the temple, about Solomon's temple was built 400 years after the tabernacle.
Can you tell us what a
We,
cubit is in modern standards?
some people would say 17 to 25 inches. And I've had people say, well, you don't know how long a cubit is, so this can't work. And I say, as long as you use the same length of the cubit, it'll work, whether it's a 17-inch cubit or a 25-inch cubit, as long as it's the same measurement, uh, even down to the model I have. They're all the same length, so it all fits together.
Do you know anybody
Whether
who's
it's
trying
we
to make a life-size version like the Noah's Ark?
Yes, that's interesting. You mentioned Noah's Ark. If you'll take a second look at Noah's Ark dimensions, guess what shape it might have been?
That that's the shape that it mentions in the Babylonian version of Noah's Ark. It says that it was round according to the latest research.
Yes, imagine a giant boat. Would it be able to handle waves than a long rectangular boat? Yes. Would it be able to the square cubits or square footage, as we might say, or square meters? It would have a vast amount more room to hold the animals. But yet again, we see two or three Noah's Ark attractions that are giant rectangles. We see two or three tabernacle places that people can visit that they're box shaped as well. So the paradigm that we're under with the hive mind of the internet and the times that we live in, I believe we're about to enter a new uh, reformation, a new renaissance, and this is going to be a great time to be alive because we're seeing ancient antiquity come back to be corrected. And if you brought it to a focal point, we now understand what the Creator said to Moses, actually said to Moses, and what he meant. That's like a precious jewel to me and many other people. And regardless of your religious beliefs, we have been corrected, and now we know what was actually said. And this will put everything that we've believed, everything we've thought, science, cosmology, health, the words used for the tabernacle are all connected to the body. It could literally change the foundation of what we believe the people on Earth for what we believe history is, and possibly even science and more. All right,
I
we're
would
about
love.
to finish up. I know we're limited.
Go ahead and finish, and then I have one proposal before you go.
All right. Exodus 26, 7 through 13 gives us the most amazing thing that information that most people would find is that this is our first uh, revelation of what pi is. 3.14 is pi. The outer curtains, there's 11 outer curtains that are there are 11 curtains that are 11 or 30 cubits long. What is 11 times 30, David? 330.
There you go.
One of the curtains, if you asked me, I wouldn't have known. If you take one of the curtains and fold them in half, what's 15 from 330? 315. We're close to pi, but that's not it. In Exodus 26:13, it says you'll take out 1 cubit of the 315 cubits from the seams that we talked about earlier, where they go edge to edge or end to end. That might be what we would consider 2 or 3 inches out of those each 11 connections. That adds up to 1 cubit, which gives us 314 cubit circumference, which is 100 cubit diameter, a 50 cubit radius, which is our first ever in history pi, at least a 0.5 approximate, that we have hundreds of years before we see other examples of that coming out of the scriptures, out of India, out of Greece. As I go down, and I have more details on my website, renformation.com, R-E-N, renformation.com. It goes into some details along the way. I've got and I'm continuing to work on this every week. It's being updated, and it's just a very exciting time to be alive. And as I'm scrolling down off to the right, one of the pictures is of a modern day wedding yurt. A yurt is a giant dome-shaped tent that is still used today in different parts of the world. And we see a newlywed couple being married, having the photograph taken in this giant, beautiful, earthy yurt. It was probably less than half the size of the tabernacle, but you can see how impressive that would be to walk in and see the Ark of the Covenant. As we continue to go down, you'll see pictures of the measurements and explaining the different scriptures that may not make sense right away. So I have pictures that help illustrate it so it makes a little more sense. Now, the last point I want to end on is the travesty of the traditional tabernacle. It is, in the Hebrew language, a transgender tabernacle.
I'm sorry,
Those
but
of you,
we can go there, and this
okay.
is a very progressive radio station. So if you're gonna go that route, I can let you finish your thought, but we're not gonna entertain anything that we consider discriminatory of any type.
Thank you. I appreciate you telling me that. If you see the picture in the middle, it shows the boards of the traditional tabernacle being inserted into the sockets of the base. The Hebrew word, the gender of the Hebrew word for these boards is feminine. The sockets you see them being placed into is masculine. It's a pretty clear picture of how the roles are reversed in the genders. The female board should not be placed into the masculine sockets. It should be the boards are brought together by a linchpin. The boards are feminine. The linchpin that goes in between these boards, as we talked about earlier, end to end, how they're brought together, is through the pins or the safety pins or the linchpins that hold all of these pillars, these boards together. So, and the last picture off to the right, you'll see the simple dimensions of a circular tabernacle with scriptures indicating what the measurements are, and it adding up to pi, and then the illustration below it with what I call Josephus's tabernacle, not getting any of the measurements right because it is a box shape versus a circle. Then you can see I've got other illustrations and other points to make, but we end with my last video and then we can move on.
All the different shapes, illustrations that showed it as a tan, as a square, and now we're seeing a 3D version of what most people assume it looks like, which is a box with two huge curtains on it, with 3 curtains, and then it keeps going to more curtains under it, all different colors. It looks kind of like a cattle gate, or like fence around. And now we're looking at the new connections, um, different ways to lay down the curtains. Now they're laying next to each other and building like a long string, uh, and then start shaping them into the, you call that a octagon? What
Decagon?
is it?
10, decagon, deca.
The decagon, and then doing the same thing. So it's going through the first layer of curtains, which are colorful, then another layer of curtains, which are gray, and then doing the same for those, turning them around into the shape, which is 6 by 30, 5 by 30, and 30-2. What does that mean?
That's a 315 cubit long circumference. And then we also have in 2613 the 1 cubit taken away, which adds up to 314 cubit long, or 300 cubit circumference. The first pi given in human history.
Okay, and all this is coming from the House of El Shaddai. This is his video
Yes.
where he sees the pieces falling into place. So he's restructuring with this 3D animation. Even the beams are being reconfigured into the decagon shape. There to compare, check your tradition. And then it looks like a yurt with a circular fence around it. Learn the true story of the Exodus. So the challenge I had for you, Mr. Hendrix, was for you to return and discuss the Ezekiel's vision of the temple, and then the New Jerusalem as depicted in the New Testament, the Book of Revelation, and possibly in the writings of Paul, because I want to see how it works with those measurements. There's a lot of different ideas. I've heard it be more of a square or a cube versus rectangle. So, so yeah, so we're gonna end with that. Just if you can come and give us your mystical take. I know you had things about the different gender pronouns that are used for items. Hebrew, just like French and Spanish, has male and female words, and some of it has to do with how you place things together. And then also, a challenge is to talk about how do you see that religious tradition has gone away from the Bible as compared to being faithful to the Bible, depending on each interpretation, either Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. So we want to thank you for your time. Very informative presentation, and like we said, they can look you up on your website and learn more about all the details that you have shared with us on the show.
Thank you. Would you like me to address some of the questions and counterpoints you had?
If you want to stick around, the video version is going to be longer than the radio version. So if you feel comfortable doing it now, we can do that, and it will be on the YouTube channel.
Sure, that'd be great. I run home to mama to be safe. And what I mean by that is I'm trying to just approach this as though you've gotten instructions how to build your barbecue grill or a cabinet, and just looking at it as though these are just simple instructions to build a tent, building it in its sequential order, precept upon precept. And the spiritual implications, they're so vast I wouldn't know where to begin. So I try just to stick to the building of the tabernacle. Some things that I've thought of, and I'm about to speculate. And speculate, I'm just some guy off the street, some guy on the internet. So don't take this for anything other than that's what somebody might have said once. When Jesus was 12, his parents didn't know where he was, and he was in the temple. And the most educated men of the land were there at a special time of the year. And they said they were astonished and amazed by the knowledge Jesus had. In my estimation, and this is me just speculating, I believe this is what he told them of what the tabernacle really looked like, what Solomon's temple looked like, and possibly even the temple they were in had never had the presence of the Lord, never had the Ark of the Covenant. And there Jesus is back in this temple for the first time. later in his life, he goes on to say, "This temple will be destroyed." So that's one thing that I speculate. I like to think about 12-year-old Jesus in the temple telling these wise men, the tabernacle and Solomon's temple and the New Jerusalem and Ezekiel's temple, they were domes, not Babylonian structures like the Romans or whatever the flavor of the decade was. So this is just encouragement. I hope people will take a second look at it. And again, the knowledge of loom weaving can't be underestimated, because this is people who are loomers, who understand it. I don't know if they're called loomers, but they see, oh, it's the ends, it's the warp, it's the cut ends. That makes perfect sense to make the loops. And the outer courtyard does the same thing. And so it's just really fascinating. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions or counterpoints you might have, David. Try to
Um,
answer.
so yeah, so you said you only had 1 hour, but if you had time, what what are the measurements of the Temple of Ezekiel, and are they the same or similar to the ones to the Mishkan? Because the Mishkan, it's a smaller version. It's supposed to be portable, and then I believe the vision of Ezekiel is supposed to be a permanent temple. And then in the Book of Revelation, it says that there will be no temple, that God would be the source. So are you talking about the now you're talking about the measurements of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem being dome shaped as well? What do you?
Yes, very good points. I'm glad you mentioned that about the tabernacle in Revelation 21 will be, as the as Revelation says, it will, the temple will be God Himself, and the New Jerusalem I see as the structure of what we would call the dome, and it would be, huge, amazingly big. You've seen pictures of the traditional box or cube over Jerusalem. It's taking up thousands and thousands of miles. Well, I guess you would imagine that, but just dome shaped. And as far as Ezekiel, I don't feel I'm qualified to talk about the measurements. Um, we see two different measurements, and they're close to each other. And I've heard it said that they're measuring from the outside wall versus the inside wall, or the top of the very top versus the bottom of the top, in the different, in the outer court and the inner court. So the measurements are similar, not exactly. So you might think, well, this is, I just don't understand. Well, it's like saying, what size is your TV? Is it a 55 inch? Yeah. Was that 55 inches caddy corner to caddy corner, or is that lengthwise or height-wise, or and when we say in America 2x4, everyone knows what that is. Well, is that 10 foot long or 12 foot long, or what type of wood? So again, my focus is on the the blueprints, the simple blueprints of how to build this giant tent, the Mishkan, the meeting tent, the tent meeting, the house of the Lord. And so the other areas, like I said, um, Andrew L. Hoy from Project 314, he's the mechanical engineer that made this discovery, and he he's more versed, far more versed. He actually went to Israel, and they wrote a piece about him in one of the main newspapers. He spent time there learning Hebrew. So, I'm like Ned and the first reader, where Project 314 is advanced trigonometry all the way down to the basics. So I'm just a gateway to discover and help people at least think about what the tabernacle really looked like, and the spiritual implications. I feel uncomfortable even talking about it, because I wouldn't know where to begin. I'm not educated enough. I don't feel educated enough to speak to that with any authority, like I did with Jesus at 12 years old. That's simplistic, but in my mind, I think that could have happened.
And you said you debated people on the subject. Where can they find those videos?
I've never, this is my first video. I've usually debated people most of the time on Facebook. I go to different uh, religious Facebook channels and make the proposal. And some people are excited and want to know more. Some people are resistant. Well, you can't break. You're telling me that Jews and Christians for 2,600, 2,500 years have been wrong, and you're right? Why on earth would you say that? Well, the power of religious traditions, it, it's not going to be overcome overnight. And the more I learned about this, the more I debated people, I thought, we are really thinking in a Roman Babylonian mindset. When you hear the word squared, you think of a cube or a square. Where when pi is involved, it's a circle or a dome or a sphere or a hemisphere. So it's a whole paradigm shift in how you view the scriptures. And I try to break it down. I feel like I'm a simple man, so I thought, how would I explain this to someone who didn't know anything about the Bible? Like I said, if I was to speak to a group of children, I would simply say the curtains, the boards are put together, seamed like this, end to end, and not edge to edge, not the length of the edge to edge, but like this. And that's the simplest way I can explain it. And looking at Exodus 26, 1 through 6, that that's where all this happens. That's the foundation. That's where we lay the paradigm, the foundation for this tabernacle. And in verse 4 in particular, where it uses the same word in two different ways. The Bible is repeating itself throughout this entire description through Exodus 26 and 27. We're getting word efficiency that doesn't repeat itself. And this says, and the other side, for example, one part it says, and the other side, it's having you fill in the blank what the first side was based on the directions given on the second side. You see what I'm saying? It's saving words. It's trying to be as efficient as possible, but not in verse 4. And I may be wrong, but it repeats the same word twice in two different ways. That quatosh word, the end, the cutoff, the cut end, the looming, the warp. It uses the word end, and it uses the word outermost. The outermost of the curtain is this. This is the outermost. This is the outermost. Remember, we can have four edges, edge, 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 but we can only have two ends. In 26:4, it says end, end. All the curtains are joined together, end to end, with the blue loops and the gold hooks. So I almost, it's humbling and it's exciting at the same time to think that the Lord was maybe winking at us in modern day civilization, saying, this is going to be a booger and you're going to need some extra help. So on this one verse, I'm going to say the same thing twice. And you can look at the Hebrew. They come from the same root Hebrew word, saying the same thing twice with just in a matter of a few words, just to make sure we know what edge it's going to be. Is it the 28 cubit long edge or is it the 4 cubit edge? Well, it's the 4 cubit edge, so let's call it end, so there's no gray area. There's no misunderstanding, because end and sledge are two different things. And we see that repeated in the outer courtyard curtains. We see that repeated with the boards that are put together. Instead of like this, they're put together like this. It's the same word, cut off, cut end. And when you read it in English, some objections, some people might say, well, it says this side and that side, and a circle can't have a side. Well, wait a minute. What does the Hebrew say? The word side there means ribs, like a rib cage. Like on my website, you can see the rib cage is almost dome shaped itself. So the Bible is saying, here are the ribs right here. You can see that you've got this side of the ribs and that side of the ribs. They're round. And when it says west by westward, or it says south by southward, we're looking at this circle. Where do I have it? We're looking at the circle. If you look at the one in the middle, we are facing the east gate. We are looking west. So when the Bible says west, you start at this gate and you begin to go towards the west. When it says south by southward, from our perspective, you would take a left and go south and southward. And the Hebrew says to the right, to the right, to the right. So it's describing how you would go around this circle with words that might seem unfamiliar to us. But remember, we're locked in to Exodus 26, 1 through 6. It's created a decagon that we have to make everything else fit into. When Josephus Flavius, tradition, people even today in seminary, I taught the traditional tabernacle myself. But when we go and begin at the beginning of the construction instructions, we see that we are locked into a paradigm that we have to make the rest of Exodus fit into this and not vice versa. That's been the mistake throughout history is, well, we take in 27:18, it says 100 length and 50 width. That's a box. Yeah, if you ignore Exodus 27:17 that says roundabout. The translation is roundabout, meaning go around, and it could go around a circuit or a rectangle. But one of the definitions of the roundabout is a circle. Well, that doesn't maybe necessarily mean that could be a rectangle. It doesn't mean a circle specifically. Okay. Well, you have to ignore Exodus 26, 1 through 6, or decagon. And then you have to ignore the first pi ever discovered in history, Exodus 26, 7 through 13. That gives us the 314 cubit circumference, 100 cubit diameter, 50 cubit radius. So you have to fit the rest of the tabernacle, the structure, the tent part, to Exodus 26, 1 through 13. Well, if you start building this point by point, you don't go out of order, you look at the Hebrew and the Hebrew root versus what some interpreter used, some words that they use that, and no English or no other translation is perfect other than the Hebrew itself. You've got to get in there a little bit and take a step back and say, well, if this means that, then that means this. And so it is breaking with tradition, but we are, and I simply am saying, follow the construction instructions and their sequential order, 26:1 through the end of 27 in order, and it will build this wilderness tabernacle that is this giant, impressive, amazing dome that held the Ark of the Covenant and the other furnishings. And this is where they made the sacrifice. And it was just like I said, my website's updated every week the more I learn.
Wonderful. Again, we want to thank you for your time and for the knowledge you imparted onto our audience. If you'd like to come back later, would like to go deeper into the Ark of the Covenant, your theories about what happened to it, as well as Noah's Ark and other structures mentioned in the Bible. Um, it's interesting that I don't know if it's Midrash or something that maybe Kabbalah that says that the Garden of Eden was a sphere. Um, and I have to look into it, but there is some mystical stuff in relation to spheres. And it's interesting the whole universe is spheres with the planets and the sun and things like that. But thank you again, and we appreciate you sharing your website and all this information. For our video audience, would you like to share your website again as we close up?
Sure. And David, I appreciate your questions, your counterpoints, and like I said, I'm still learning. And some of the times I grow the most and learn the most is when people ask me something I don't know. And so this is the only way I learn. My website is Renformation, RENFORMATION, renformation.com. And it goes through the building process, the blueprints of the Wilderness Tabernacle. If you really want to dive into deep this and get the model, this model is really large. It is from, where is this at? Project314.org. Project314.org is run by Andrew Hoy. He is the mechanical engineer that made this discovery around 2014-15, and he is an excellent source. I'll show his book one more time. And if I've said anything out of place or maybe something that was incorrect, then I'll take blame for it and apologize for it and hope to learn from it. And David, you've been a great host. Thank you for guiding me and helping me along. This is my first podcast ever. So if it's rough around the edges, you know why, but you've been a great host to help me continue along the way.
Thank you. We'll be sending you the link so you can post it on your website and let people know about our show.
Great. Thank you, David.